Independence Day. Gunfire broke Park Chung-hee's speech. A North Korean sympathizer fumbled a Smith & Wesson, shot himself, then charged forward, firing wildly. His fourth round missed Park and struck the First Lady in the head. As she was dragged away, Park adjusted the microphone, finishing his speech. His cold devotion to Korea never ceased. To oppressive Imperial Japan, the Park family surrendered their harvest amidst the fallout of the Great Depression. The once aristocratic family was dispossessed of their nobility. Banished from the clan to a small village, his father fell into alcoholism. Failing to carry the weight of a starving family of 5, the mother managed housework and farming. Additional children proved too burdensome. Several abortive attempts ensued, yet the child survived. The future dictator was born. At 2 years old, Chung-hee landed in a smoldering fire pit, burning scars on his forearms he kept hidden for life. Often going days without food, he still received high grades. His fervent studies led him to biographies admiring Napoleon. He was accepted into the prestigious Daejo School. The school, overseen by Japanese military officers, trained elementary school teachers. But it was the rigid discipline which drew Chung-hee's interest. He grew more fascinated by the military than by teaching. His family's poverty forced him to miss classes, leading to poor grades. He graduated from Daejo second to last. Nonetheless, Chung-hee landed a teaching job in a remote coal mining town. Offering assistance to several students, Chung-hee was known for his caring teaching, but the town's dullness drove him to drink like his father. The Second World War began. Chung-hee was invigorated, yet the Japanese military did not enlist Koreans, questioning their loyalty. Further, he was too old and rejected after several appeals. Desperate to escape a dull life, Chung-hee pawned his life to the Japanese Empire. Using his own blood as ink, painted an oath asserting service until death. Miraculously, his fidelity led to his acceptance. Chung-hee adopted a Japanese alias and became Takagi Masao. Unlike previously, Masao now had food and rose to the top of his class, eventually ascending to the rank of lieutenant. Japan surrendered. The ephemeral empire dominated Asia but was relegated back to its home isles. With Japan's occupation and subsequent relinquishment of empire, Korea became independent yet bifurcated, torn in two by Soviet and American occupying forces. Pak returned to the south and enrolled in the newly established Defense Academy, also learning Marxist literature. There, he graduated with a close friend, Kim Jae-gyu, later consequential. 2 years into studies, Pak was sentenced to death by the new Korean Republic, owing to his earlier communist associations. On the cusp of execution, eminent military officers intervened and spared his life. He was discharged instead. With the invasion of Communist Korea into capitalist Korea, he was reinstated. Rapidly rising the ranks during the Korean War, Pak became Brigadier General. His energetic rise brought him a prominent position with the armed forces. Pak now bore responsibility for the defense of Seoul, the capital. The First Republic was put into question by its citizens as it failed to provide results. A rigged election inflamed mass protests, railing against political corruption, economic mismanagement, and authoritarianism. Amid protesting student deaths, the Second Republic soon dawned. But amongst a faltering economy, the situation was fragile for its new democratic leaders. Inflation soared and crime doubled amid food shortages and high rates of unemployment. Pak had brewed seditious thoughts against the First Republic, now contended with the fragile Second. Patiently laying low, he marshaled the Military Revolutionary Committee with reformist officers. Pak gathered support from business and media. Also integral was allegiance of Chan Do-young, the Army Chief of Staff. But the open secret of sedition eventually floated to the Prime Minister. With Chang's collusion, the conspiracy was dismissed as a false alarm. A new date was set for the plot in the witching hour 4 days later, but it leaked again. The alarm sounded. Refusing disaster, Pak seized command, striving to salvage the plot. counterintelligence dispatched military police to prevent the putsch. When arriving to arrest the suspects, the police were possessed by Pok's address. We have been waiting for the civilian government to bring back order to the country. The Prime Minister and ministers, however, are mired in corruption, leading the country to the verge of collapse. We shall rise up against the government to save the country. We can accomplish our goals without bloodshed. Let us join in this revolutionary army to save the country. Convinced of the cause, the military police joined. Imbibed with momentum, Pak presented an ultimatum to Chang Do-young to join the coup. Chang conceded, ordering the seizure of the Blue House. An artillery brigade advanced to Central Army headquarters and Seoul's downtown. All three branches of government and the national broadcasting system were soon overthrown. A live broadcast played across South Korea, iterating Pak's goals: anti-corruption, anti-communism, development, and reunification. The coup was complete. The Second Republic dissolved. With martial law declared, political consolidation commenced. An internal power struggle struck. Pak took initiative. Chang was arrested for alleged obstruction. Having masterminded the coup, the KCIA was formalized with a free reign over the country. Washington compelled a return to civilian rule. The Third Republic of Korea dawned. The nation was now in Pak's hands. Shadowed by the military and industrial might of its northerly kin, the North Koreans, the south of the DMZ was comparatively weak, penniless, and agrarian. Japan once provided capital investment in industrialization. However, the Pacific War crushed the few feeble eggs from Korea's nest. The Forgotten War then scorched the land and produced more tragedy. With no peace treaty, the stronger communist Korea loomed. War could return at any moment. Food shortages hit, rice reserves vanishing. The government encouraged mixing barley with rice as it desperately imported more. The majority scraped their lives from soil while suffering borderline malnutrition. Night soil, or human waste, fertilized the fields. Most children hosted intestinal parasites and sought to fill their belly rather than their mind. Infant mortality and illiteracy was accordingly high. Tuberculosis was the leading cause of death. American aid covered nearly the entire budget. Past republics' corruption gnawed the little the state collected, while inefficiency produced black markets and bribery rotted trust. So Pak jailed hundreds of corrupt politicians, including those disloyal to him. The country answered to the Blue House only. Southern Korea was resource poor. Pak's answer wasn't laissez-faire, it was the visible hand of dirigisme. Modeled after the Soviet 5-year plans, Pak converted it for capitalism. The engines of transforming the peasant economy: cement, fertilizer, synthetic fibers, iron, and oil. Coal-fired kilns, turbines, and furnaces. Cement soon poured into roads, rails, and ports. Textiles and apparel industries spun abundant cheap labor into export cash. Banks nationalized. Exporters borrowed at near zero. The moribund Korean stock exchange was resuscitated to liquefy the illiquid market. Pak disliked monopolies but needed economic velocity. Mirroring Japan's zaibatsu, chaebols were influential business families. Chaebol laggards were punished, while fast and risk-taking visionaries were backed. It was a high-risk, high-reward market. Samsung tightened its grip as the largest chaebol. Lucky Gold Star began filling Korean homes with appliances and electronics. Hyundai became the heavy industry chaebol, a synergistic presence of steel, shipbuilding, and eventual car industries. Hundreds of thousands of Koreans served in the Vietnam War. The conscripts, as a reservoir of literate, disciplined manpower, would prove instrumental for Korea's growth. Factories multiplied. With roughly 1,000 new manufacturers a year, exports quadrupled, surpassing expectations. Profits circulated into education and technological research. 24-hour electricity became priority. Awake to history, Pak knew steel was power, a steelmaking pet project hardened into a national backbone. He planned a war economy without war. Self-sufficiency in heavy industry and petrochemicals was vital to that ambition. Impressed with West Germany's Wirtschaftswunder and Autobahn, highways became doctrine. Pak traced expressways himself with his artilleryman experience. At his pen stroke, hills and plains became canvas for bulldozing. Normalization with Japan brought new capital, technology, and markets. But with Washington's withdrawal from the Vietnam War, the economic boom ebbed. With the chaebol, Pak dropped sticks for carrots. He compensated them in subsidies and tax cuts for their respective speeds and scales. The big three chaebols swelled. New chemical complexes brought jobs, but sometimes pollutive diseases. A campaign was launched against perceived Western decadence. Public servants scrutinized hair and skirt lengths, while barbers forcibly clipped long-haired men in the street. Moral police raided motels for adultery. North Korean elite commandos slipped south of the DMZ wearing South Korean uniforms, nearly reaching the Blue House in Pak. In retaliation, Black Operations Unit 684 formed to assassinate Kim Il-sung. Composed of petty criminals who were promised money and underwent harsh training. But once the mission was called off, the unit mutinied. All were executed. The price of hypergrowth was emerging, but per capita income doubled. Exports quadrupled again. Over 3,000 schools were built. The peasant economy was molten. After nearly losing a rigged election, he rewrote the rules. The new Yushin constitution turned a hybrid regime into a presidency for life. In the Fourth Republic, society had to march to his military drum. Rock music was banned, art censored, and nightlife restricted. Strongman Pak then launched the Purification Campaign. City streets were swept of homeless, beggars, and street children, detained without trial and sent to hard labor. This is all while the KCIA wired phones, pressed editors, and tortured political organizers. Opposition lawmakers were bribed, blackmailed, threatened, and arrested. In Japan, with Yakuza help, KCIA agents abducted dissident, later president, Kim Dae-jung, drugging and dragging him onto a boat. Weighted for drowning, he was saved when the Japan Coast Guard closed in. Funneling a quarter of its economy, the North Koreans possessed an enormous military. Seoul answered with a Yogok program, a militarization sprint to mass-produce light weapons and ammunition. Imports of finished cars were banned. His long-shot dream materialized. Homegrown models rolled onto Korean roads. Currency reform curbed money laundering. Links to Tehran brought a boom from cheap energy. Urban South Korea became fully electrified. Development came to the countryside. Seimao Undong, or New Village movement, bridged rural and urban gaps. Every village received free bags of cement and rebar. Straw roofs turned into tin and tile. Collective cleanups and tree planting days commenced. Villages were ranked and rewarded by bureaucrats in Pak personally. Rural incomes doubled. Electricity, clean water, roads, and irrigation reached most villages. Superstition was to be hammered out of Korea. Purification squads torched village shrines, felled sacred trees and totem poles, destroyed burial mounds, and arrested shamans. Other writing systems were purged. Hangul became the nation's sole script. Yulgok kept the garrison state hot. The Paekgam missile test displayed Seoul's greater reach. Refineries stitched a petrochemical belt. The world's second largest nuclear station, Kori 1, parted nuclear energy to the grid. Electronics crept from assembly to design. Pak reviewed civilian factories with a militarist inspection weekly, with managers scolded or lauded according to performance. Working conditions were harsh: 12-hour workdays, no weekend, no minimum wage, and unions prohibited. Inequality widened. Profits were privatized, losses were socialized. Velocity, at any cost. Yet the material revolution was undeniable. Night soil shifted to chemical fertilizer, scant carbs ripened to protein. Most South Koreans became literate. Universal electrification neared completion, clean water flowed, extreme poverty collapsed. Infant mortality halved, and life expectancy jumped a decade. Televisions jumped from a rarity to a fixture. South Korea matured into an industrial, sovereign, and potently fledged state, but internal forces began to cross. Ever since the bullet intended for him killed his wife, he crawled into a deep introversion, while fatigue consumed his discipline. His repression became clumsy. Brilliant economic modernization meant emerging social forces sought democratic government. But the iron will that built Korea was unbendable. Eventually, civil strife grew and massive protests erupted with tens of thousands demonstrating. Demonstrators were answered with force. Pak retreated into his fortress. Ever near, chief bodyguard Cha Ji-chul became his number one. But old hometown friend and KCIA head Kim Jae-gyu felt rebuked watching Cha's vining influence. Cha insulted and degraded Kim. Their titanic rivalry simmered. While protests burned outside, another frequent banquet set the men together. Kim brought his Walter PPK hidden in his bookshelf. From his chair, Kim stood suddenly, opening fire on Cha's arm. Kim then shot the president in the chest. The pistol jammed. Kim grabbed his subordinate's .38 revolver and aimed it at Pak's head. Cha dove into Kim. Wrestling for survival, Kim shot Cha's stomach. Shoving his lifeless rival off, Kim strode to the maimed Pak, leveling the revolver behind his right ear, firing a bullet through his skull. At that moment, 18 years of rule ended at the hands of a brotherly friend. The Asian tiger roared from a land of scant resources. Like Pak, like state, both came from nothing and ascended to the top through sheer will. Pak was as disciplined as the new society he built. Small, compact, humorless, and austere. He valued attention to detail, precision, and decisiveness. He preferred being feared, not loved. After repressing Confucianism, Pak became Confucian himself. Admiring Meiji reformers and samurai Bushido ethic, he believed vision was a ruler's greatest weapon. He can be considered CEO of Korea Incorporated. Rent-seeking became institutionalized. Subsidies, monopolistic licenses, tariffs, all in service to his development march. Crony capitalism metastasized, encroaching into politics, industry, and culture. Over it all loomed the KCIA. The omnipotent eye wiretapped lawmakers, tortured dissidents, and surveilled citizenry. A prince of a Machiavellian mold, sly as a fox, strong as a lion, brutal when needed, generous when relevant. Generalissimo Pak sought nothing in between revolution or death, but reaped both. His scythe harvested South Korea's prosperity, before finally cutting him down.